Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the cobblestone streets of Paris, the aroma of freshly baked bread flowing through the air, the soft murmur of conversations echoing from a nearby cafe. Now listen. That's the sound of a language that has shaped the world, the language of love, of revolution, of art, of diplomacy. For the French, philosophy is not merely an abstract exercise of reason, but an art form, a pursuit infused with beauty, passion, and the rhythm of language itself. To understand philosophy in the French way is to treat it both as a lover's embrace and a duel of wit, equal parts heart and intellect, seduction and challenge. The French do not merely seek answers, they revel in the elegance of questions. A question well posed, rich with nuance and ambiguity, is a thing of beauty. It is the first brushstroke on a canvas of thought, leaving space for contradictions, doubt, for wonder. For the French, understanding philosophy is like savoring wine. It demands patience, discernment, and an appreciation for subtle notes of complexity hidden beneath the surface. They have a passion for strolling through ideas, wandering without haste, letting the mind meander through existential alleys, ethical boulevards, and epistemological gardens. Every detour is a delight, every pause a chance to admire the landscape of thought. The destination matters less than the journey, for it is the act of pondering that philosophy comes alive. To the French, philosophy is intimately tied to language, and in their language, words are like jewels polished by centuries of poets and thinkers. Their syllables carry the weight of history, the cadence of poetry, and the precision of reason. To speak philosophy in French is to weave through thought that is as much about rhythm and elegance as it is meaning. Above all, the French see philosophy as a conversation, dynamic, alive, and human. It is never solitary. It is an encounter, a dialogue, a dance between minds. It is a thrill of disagreement, the intimacy of shared inquiry, and the quiet allure of collective contemplation. For the French, philosophy mirrors life itself, messy, fleeting, and profound. To understand it is to not resolve, but to embrace the complexity of existence with grace, to wrestle with the unknown as if it were a lover, and to delight in the endless pursuit of meaning. It is not merely an act of intellect. It is a celebration of the soul's longing to make sense of the universe, one exquisite thought at a time. The intention of this video, along with the last one, is only to cover the major French social, artistic, philosophical, and literary movements. Dozens of other movements beyond what is covered here are fairly well known. These at times were more extreme, maybe more creative, and I can imagine in total there were far more. Paris is known for having had an infinite number of movements. Take this aforementioned attitude, this intrigue, and bring it to a public forum, a place available to all. Better yet, what about making it available on nearly every block? That is the concept of the cafe. Perhaps nothing has given the world more artistic movements, more developments of philosophies than the French cafe. Not only would intellectual debate be a constant, but some of the greatest works of modern literature have in whole been written in these cafes. The ideas that flourished at the cafe would be taken to a salon. There, the creators would be given more of a formal discourse impossible support. Salons were often held by wealthy intellectual socialite women with strong abilities to direct further development of these areas. The host's personality was often one of quick wit and a talk show ability to engage in discussion. These movements spread across literature, music, art, philosophy, political science, and societal structure. Salons were by invitation only. Many of Paris's most influential and powerful people would be invited either to participate or simply stay up with the trends at the salons. I failed to mention Frenchman Charles Perrault in the last episode. He published several well-known stories in the late 17th century, including Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Bluebeard, Mother Goose, and others. Photography was invented in France in 1827 and became popular in the 1840s. This freed art from being a recording of a scene or subject. Artists then would embrace the abstract or emphasize what they wished. All the art movements that followed in the coming decades and beyond would have an element of the abstract. Abstract as a movement obtained its name in the early 20th century as art reached an increased level of abstraction. Abstract art has gone in many directions, including non-representative art, in which the attempt is not to represent anything in the real world, but through various techniques to create emotions, ideas, enjoyment, or even displeasure for the viewer. Enlightenment, Age of Reason, or the Age of Science in the 17th, 18th century, thinking focused on reason, logic, and scientific inquiry. The artistic style emphasized balance, order, and adherence to strict rules. Towards this end, artists began to demand more creative freedom and self-expression. The French Revolution promised liberty and equality, but the period after instead provided upheaval, violence, and disillusionment. During a vacuum of thought, ideas of German Romanticism spread to France, and France created their own version of it. Romanticism was a rebellion against Enlightenment's reason and classical rigidness. French Romanticism focused on emotions, imagination, individualism, spontaneity, irrationalism, heroism, and glorification of nature. Its peak was from 1800 to 1850. When we use the term that something is being romanticized, it is from this period. Such classics as Les Miserables, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, both by Victor Hugo, Count of the Monte Cristo, The Three Musketeers, both by Alexandre Dumas, or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, are a few examples. The emphasis was on the dramatic in the story, the extreme. Romanticism embraced more unconventional lifestyles and rejected many norms of society. Their priorities were artistic expression and spiritual exploration over materialism and wealth. They congregated in the same locations to share ideas and be around others with similar philosophical views. They had a fascination with foreign lands, exotic locations, and different times in history. Writings and paintings portrayed struggles and internal conflicts. Frenchman Jules Verne wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and Around the World in 80 Days, won an Academy Award Best Picture in 1956. Films made from these three novels each inspired me as a young boy in adventure. Jules also wrote in Romanticism, "The Romantic era was a time of tremendous exploration and curiosity with unknown places." Realism emerged in 1848 after another French Revolution. Its artistic and literary intention is to portray life exactly as it was. Realism is as things are, without the dramatic effect of Romanticism. Realism covers struggles, desires, and class structure, along with the effects of political, economic, and technological change. They look at the limitations placed on individuals by poverty, the corruption of power and wealth. Émile Zola, Honoré de Balzac, and Gustave Flaubert were three of the more well-known realist writers. Realism spread throughout the Western world, and many best-selling novels came from it over the next 100 years. During France's Second Empire, 1852 to 1870, under Napoleon III, there was much construction in making the Paris we now know. Paris became the world's center of glamour, entertainment, and social life. This was the time of Romanticism, Realism, and emergent Impressionism, the first part of Modernism. Large numbers of artists from around the world would come to Paris to live. Throughout the 19th century, until the middle of the 20th century, Paris was the world art and intellectual center. It continued to be a hub, but after World War II, New York and London also attracted a large number of intellectuals from around the world. French modernism is a complex and multidimensional movement that was a reaction to profound societal changes, the anxieties that went along with rapid change, and its questioning of its effects. Among these were industrialization, consumerism, urbanization, and instability from war, such as World War I. Artists and writers could dive into the consciousness, the perspective of their characters. Their works often portrayed a disconnect of individuals from society or the world as a whole. Modernists felt that past art movements, such as Romanticism, were outdated and unable to represent insight into this new world. They would employ Surrealism, abstraction, Cubism, and symbolism to evoke emotions that realism could not. Experimentation was encouraged. Modernism, in some ways, embraced the simple. Architecture, furniture design was about practicality, functionality, and the lack of detail. Many writers favored precise language and stripped away overly sentimental or decorative descriptions. The intention was to convey raw, unfiltered emotion. The expression art for art's sake is from French modernism. This was a response to critics who judged modernistic art as being art without purpose or meaning. The word avant-garde also comes from this time. It is the word applied to political ideology, writing styles, philosophy, and art so profound that it is outside any of the artistic or social movements. Modernism was also a reaction to a quickly changing world. The old ways had proven not to work, as evidenced by tremendous suffering, loss of life, and the pointlessness of near constant warfare. Writers then looked to abandon the previous rules of structure and writing style. One of the styles that emerged was stream of consciousness writing, which was the voice inside one's head, talking non-stop without structure, but showing anxieties, fears, and emotions. Modernism began with Impressionism in the 1860s and would continue until the 1960s when it was replaced by Post-Modernism. Impressionism sought to catch fleeting moments like the change of color in the day or seasons. Pre-mixed paintings in metal tubes were invented, and artists then could paint outside instead of being stuck in the studios. They then emphasized the bright colors they would see outside, and they did not in the studio. They shifted away from historical and mythological themes to everyday life. They painted landscapes, urban streets, leisure activities, and ordinary people. Their names included Edouard Manet, Pierre Renoir, Paul Monet, Paul Cézanne, Edgar Degas, and a number of other painters who are known to this day. They would all meet twice a week in Paris. They did this starting in the early 1860s and reached their peak in the 1870s and 80s. Auguste Rodin, the sculptor of the Thinker and the Kiss, became friends with the other Impressionist artists. His sculptures have been associated with Impressionist art. He is considered the founder of modern sculpture. Post-Impressionists peaked 1886 to 1905. They would often meet in the same place the Impressionists did. Post-Impressionists included Vincent van Gogh, Paul Cézanne, Georges Seurat, and Paul Gauguin. Post-Impressionism developed from Impressionism but moved more towards geometric forms and moved away from an emphasis on spontaneous or fleeting light. Paris has long had a reputation for bringing artists, musicians, dancers, composers, and philosophers from around the world to participate in its flourishing movements. They too could be found around the city at its cafes and salons. American writer Gertrude Stein would hold a weekly salon in Paris between 1906 and 1937. Here she would introduce Pablo Picasso to Henri Matisse about 1906. The American Lost generation of writers would also meet with her. From this collaboration, along with some other artists, Cubism would develop. Cubism takes a scene, breaks it down into geometrical shapes, then puts it back together in a jumbled form, and may look at these shapes from different angles as well. Cubism led to Surrealism. Surrealism created scenes from dreams, which began in 1924. They believed they created a super reality, which was shortened to surreal. Surrealists believed that rationality and logic had led to technological and scientific advancements, which led to widespread destruction, such as World War I. They then turned to irrational subconscious and dreams as sources of truth. The horrors of World War I and World War II led to philosophical questions of meaning and existence. Existentialism then reached its peak in the late 1930s and 40s. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed people sometimes deceive themselves, that they are not free. With total freedom comes total responsibility. The core tenet of existentialism is that we are born into a meaningless world, and it is up to us to make it meaningful. Writer Albert Camus would add that the world is indifferent to human concerns and desires. He believed life was absurd and that humans cannot find meaning in it unless they rebel against it. The last several decades of the French movements have called into question earlier movements by adding to them, subtracting, or changing them slightly. Post-Structuralism, Post-Modernism, and Deconstructionism emerged in the mid-20th century. The three movements have questioned such things as the reliability of language and theories, believed universal truths do not exist, and believed knowledge cannot be trusted as it's gathered by humanity. France ranks number one of any country as to the number of recipients of the Nobel Prize for Literature. They have 16 winners. Today in France, there are still dozens of natural languages and dialects spoken. 28 countries have French as an official language. More than 50 countries speak French from its colonization. I have included some well-known French songs down below, and in the future will cover more of these movements, including French film and French drama. Thank you so much for watching. Please continue to watch and have a great day.